If you are finding these ideas tantalizing, even convincing, then you are, let's be completely clear, probably a class traitor. However, major advances in democratic participation have always required class traitors, so you are in excellent and august company. Progress is turbocharged when a small core of aristocrats or financial elites are willing to support commoners in their efforts to undermine and destroy the status quo. Today, those of us in the West are the aristocrats, and the impoverished South represent the vast unwashed peasantry demanding their seat at the table. There is nothing new here except the scale. What is counterintuitive but indisputable is that the broadening of political participation has always strengthened and enriched the societies where it occurs. It seems to unleash untapped reserves of human creativity and capital. Britain and the US are excellent examples of this principle in action. Where growing participation in political life has been deflected, undermined or suppressed, the societies in question have stagnated and often simply disintegrated, as occurred to the Roman Empire and the Soviet Union. In the West we are currently flirting with that fate, particularly in the US, where corporate interests have become incredibly adept at subverting the clearly expressed will of the people. What can we do about that? History seems replete with answers on this front, which can be summarized as follows. Broaden and deepen political participation. Make the pool of participants so enormous, the voices so varied and loud, that no vested interest, no corporation, nation-state or hyperpower can possibly buy, coerce or ignore us all. The last vid attracted quite a bit of attention from anarchists, so let me spend a little time addressing that. I agree with Thomas Paine that government is a necessary evil, but anarchy is definitely worse. If it wasn't, we'd all be off to live the good but brief life in Somalia. Wise up, anarchists. The combination of the Enlightenment and parliamentary democracy has delivered the richest, most creative, productive and successful societies the world has ever seen. Let's stick with that for the moment, shall we? With that dealt with, I'm going to lay out how I think the pump could be primed for a genuine democratic global parliament. To that end, I'm going to plagiarize rather extensively the book The Age of Consent by George Monbiot. It has been deeply influential on my own thought, and I am certain that when he sues me for copyright violation, he will have an excellent case. Almost every revolution in human affairs has been described as unrealistic, generally only a few years prior to it occurring. The American, French and Russian revolutions, for example, or the fall of the Berlin Wall. And given that a global democratic revolution is the only practical strategy on offer to deliver us from the current global dictatorship of vested interests, I consider it very likely indeed. The first question we need to ask ourselves is, what is wrong with the UN? Well, let's begin with the Security Council. The Council is made up of 5 permanent seats and 10 temporary ones. The 5 permanent members, the victors of a conflict that occurred over half a century ago, have a veto which can nullify any decision even if there is complete unanimity amongst the other members. Thus, in principle, they can do as they please, and they generally do. Because there is no mechanism to hold them to account, it is no accident that the 5 permanent Security Council members are also the world's leading arms dealers. Worse still, the UN Charter grants the 5 permanent members a veto over the constitutional reform of the UN. Thus, even if every other member of the General Assembly, representing 186 countries, wishes to see a change, it can be stopped dead by a single vote from a single permanent member. This simply renders the UN General Assembly a pointless waste of money and effort. The power has been frozen in time, clutched in the fossilized hands of the victors of World War II. Then there is the issue of representation. My country of birth, Ireland, has 1 vote in the Assembly, as does India. The problem is that Ireland has 4 million people, while India has 1.1 billion. If the General Assembly actually had any power, this would be a major injustice. Finally, the UN is much too preoccupied with the relationships between states and insufficiently concerned about global society as a whole. For example, defense spending worldwide, running at over $1 trillion annually, is a scandalous and ongoing theft from the public purse, yet the UN has never condemned this because it represents the interests of the nation-states, rather than the general interests of global society. So where do we begin to get our global parliament underway? Clearly we can't wait for the nation-states to make this happen. They've had over 60 years, and we have made no progress at all. Arguably, we're slightly worse off. No, This assembly will belong to the people. Its representatives will be completely free from local considerations, and it will require no one's permission to establish it. A global general election is likely to cost several $billion, and even a virtual parliament would cost millions of dollars annually to run. Still, these are not prohibitively high numbers. The next obvious problem are governments, even democratic ones. They may not take too kindly to a body essentially competing for a slice of the power cake they have been used to munching on without interference. There is also the question of non-democratic governments. This would force some constituencies underground, and the vote, almost certainly, online. These challenges would require detailed planning. Of course, creating a parliament is not quite the same thing as creating a government. We would simply have a virtual chamber in which people could debate and argue over resolutions. It would command no army, no police force, no courts, no departments of government. But it will possess something far greater than all of these. Something that no international body, UN agency or Security Council can claim. It will have legitimacy. Directly elected, owned by the world, our parliament would possess the moral authority that all other international bodies lack utterly. And there is a precedent for this kind of action. In 500 BC, the commoners of Rome left the city, formed a parliament and elected 2 tribunes. Over the next 50 years, they gradually forced the ruling class to accept these representatives, and by 449 BC, their tribunes, now 10 in number, were recognized by the state. Today, the Internet, Skype, online translation services, and the $100 laptop put the citizens of the world within striking distance of the same kind of coordinated action taken by the plebeians of Rome over 2,500 years ago. The alternative to a parliament of elected representatives, powerless but for their legitimacy, would be a body like the Security Council that imposes its will by force of arms. I don't think that's a workable or even desirable alternative. We must make our case, and people must be convinced. Now that would be a democracy worth having. Now, if you watched the last video, it won't have escaped your notice that I banged on rather relentlessly about the need for law. You'll also notice that the solution I've just proposed does nothing to address that problem directly. There is a simple explanation for this. In brief, this issue is complex, and we are not going to get everything we want overnight. Thus we need some achievable stepping stones to get us to the end game. A parliament with legitimacy but no direct power is on the critical path for a genuine global democracy. Once again, we have a wealth of global cultural resources to draw on for precedent. Right now we have living political fossils, transitional forms of every type imaginable to examine. Constitutional monarchies are the richest seam of information at our disposal, so let's take a look. In the United Kingdom, Sweden and the Netherlands, the parliaments, or certain components of them, began their lives as unrepresentative chambers of elites, fulfilling the function of little more than an advisory council to the king. In many cases the king could overrule, ignore, or even kill annoying parliamentarians. However, over time, the parliament gradually drew more power to itself, either by stealth or by direct appeals to the people or particular power brokers. Today, the monarchies in Europe are little more than tourist attractions. Yet there was a time when the monarch, even of these benign states, could have you killed, or kill you himself, in front of witnesses, without the merest hint of repercussion. Consider the Security Council as a kind of global monarch, tyrannous, incompetent, and unrepresentative. Over time, the contrast between the Security Council and our Parliament will become stark, and I think I know where the people's choice will fall. A more recent and relevant example of political evolution along similar lines is of course the European Parliament. It began as an unrepresentative body of political appointees with little real power. Since 1979, the parliamentarians have been directly elected, and there have been some interesting and very high-profile power struggles between the Parliament and the Commission, a kind of European House of Lords. In the next vid, I'll try to get into some more detail of how elections might work, how the Parliament would first sit alongside existing global structures and over time simply replace them. Finally, what in my view the absolute extent of the powers ceded to a global administration should be, and how that could be locked down.